It's the Real Estate Podcast, brought to you by ANZ Home Loans for financial well-beings.
Hey, welcome back to the Real Estate Breakfast as we track the latest moves in the Australian property market, and streaming right now on Spotify and Apple Podcasts. From Rockhampton to Adelaide and Perth to Coffs Harbour, we are giving you all of the latest trends and real estate stories in one place. Hope your weekend was a good one. We are up to a Monday, June the 22nd, and congrats if today is your birthday. You're in pretty good company. I see that it would have been Steve Irwin's birthday. He would have been turning 64 today. Such a tragic loss. Also celebrating a birthday, Meryl Streep. She's turning 77, and Cyndi Lauper is 73. The girl is still having fun in 2026. Now, more listings, longer selling periods and softer auction conditions. That is all giving buyers greater negotiating power in some markets. And that is the point, not all markets. This past weekend, if that was you and you can relate to the current market in that way, the way that it has changed, let us know. You can leave a voice message, which is in the show notes, or you can use the trusty email, myrealestatepodcast@gmail.com. And talking of the weekend, I just couldn't believe how many of these Chinese electric cars are on the roads. Have you noticed? Brands like BYD, they're gaining attention with this aggressive pricing. They've got new models and growing consumer acceptance. We seem to now be in the space of saying, yeah, I'm prepared to buy a Chinese electric car. Tesla does remain a major player, but its dominance is being challenged as buyers just have more options to choose from. And these cars, they're pretty well spec'd. You know, there's a lot of luxury, which means more value for your dollar. And in this current market, that has got to be king. So if I held Tesla shares today, I would be selling them, no doubt about it. You know, the share stock value in Tesla can only go in one direction, is my best guess. And the days of market domination for Tesla in the EV space are probably over, because these Chinese car manufacturers, as time goes on, they're only going to be ramping these EVs up in scale more and more. But right now, let's go to Sydney and catch up once again with Margaret Lomas from Destiny Solutions. And when we last spoke, you were sort of catching your breath, I think, Margaret, with relation to the budget and some of these announcements, especially for investors in property. Now that we're sort of settled down somewhat, I know you want to just sort of go over and just lay some of the groundwork, because there are still some confusions out there with different people.
Look, absolutely. And I think when an announcement like let's remove negative gearing is made by a government, investors immediately panic and think that what this means is that buying an investment property means that all of the expenses of that property is laid right at their doorstep with no recourse or access to any kind of relief through tax benefits for those expenses. And it makes it seem like a really daunting proposition to buy a property where rent's coming in but expenses far exceed that rent, and there's not much you can do about that. And I really want people to understand that while it's not ideal, it's also not the end of the world, because it should work like this. I do want to put a caveat on this, and this is subject to confirmation because, you know, this budget's come out with so little detail and no real idea on how it's all going to be implemented. But reading the budget papers and having a look at the notes, the way I understand it is it should work like this. First of all, your expenses can be written off to the degree that your rent covers them. So you get X amount of rent in, so you don't pay tax on any of that rent if your expenses wipe out that income. So that's the first thing. Your expenses are deductible, but they're only deductible against income from property. So your investment or property income. any more that you've got, and let's face it, for most people in those first few years of owning a property, before you're able to raise the rents, before you're able to maybe reduce your repayments through debt repayment or by getting some equity in that property, in those first couple of years, normally your expenses are more than the rent. So there'll be some left over. What is proposed is that leftover is carried forward as a carried forward loss to future years. Now, when you have investment losses, they can be carried forward indefinitely until you have either a capital gain or a future profit in the form of income to write it off against. So if you find yourself with a loss from your property on your expenses, that loss gets carried forward every single year and it accumulates. And what that means is that when that property begins making a profit because your expenses are now lower than your rent, you can begin writing off that profit and therefore paying no tax on it through these accumulated losses. Or if you sell the property, those accumulated losses can be written off against that now larger capital gains tax that you have to pay because of the changes to capital gains tax.
Now, if you are an investor and you're listening and thinking, hang on, I've got a question here, just send the question through. Our email is myrealestatepodcast@gmail.com and we will get an answer for you.
Remember to follow us on any of the podcast platforms so you never miss a real estate podcast. You can follow us on Apple, Spotify and Amazon. Know your property with us. From first-time home buyers to seasoned investors to breaking property news. Discover the stories behind the real estate.
We're going to right now have a look at a bit of a square off, a head-to-head, Rockhampton versus Coffs Harbour, regional property market comparisons. This is going to be an interesting one here, Margaret, as I'll give the median house price and then I'm going to throw to you because I'll be interested in your take because you know these two areas so well. Median house price for Rockhampton, give or take at the moment, is around $682,000. Coffs Harbour, $855,000. Two very different markets here, Margaret.
I don't always like to make direct comparisons between regional areas because we're really talking about a yield versus affordability play here. So let's break that down. Rockhampton is an area that you're going to buy in at a cheaper price, but you're probably going to get a better yield. But it's a much more volatile market than Coffs Harbour. We've seen the fortunes of Rockhampton go up and down like a yo-yo over the last 20 years. There's been times when it's been the most dismal investment that you could ever make and you've bought in there and watched your values go backward at the rate of knots, and then suddenly there's a reversal, a big announcement of some kind, or beef is doing really well and all of a sudden the property prices begin to skyrocket again. If we look at Coffs Harbour, it's an entirely different proposition because it's a lifestyle buy. Let's be honest, you don't buy in Rockhampton because you love the lifestyle, but you do buy in Coffs Harbour for that lifestyle. So we see pressure on the prices come through people deciding to retire there, particularly since Foster and those areas have become a little bit more unaffordable. People are moving further up the coast for their retirement choices. You buy there if you just want a bit of a more laid-back lifestyle. But the thing about it is that you're going to get a lower yield on your investment there. So rental yields aren't as good there for the purchase price because you're paying a lot more. And I do want to say that it's yet to be determined exactly what impact that Coffs Harbour highway bypass is going to have on the town itself. Smaller towns like Bulahdelah and Karua, they really died the moment the bypass was put in place. No more cars coming through town. I don't think that's going to happen to Coffs Harbour because it's a bigger area. It has a lot more to offer than Bulahdelah has to offer. But we do need to consider that in the future, Coffs Harbour might be slightly impacted by the fact that there's no longer a main road going through town. A lot of the commerce is going to be taken away.
Yeah, and if you're interested about the median unit price for Rockhampton, between $395 and $430K, and for Coffs Harbour, $595,000. But you make a really good point about what makes those two markets so very different. Rockhampton is heavily driven by affordability, mining influence, of course, infrastructural spending and strong rental yields. For Coffs Harbour, definitely people are going for that lifestyle. Now, let's turn our attention to the federal government, which has been heavily focused on helping first home buyers. Tasmania is heading in a slightly different direction. The state government has confirmed that the boosted $30,000 first home buyers grant is going to be reduced back to $20,000 from next month. And stamp duty concessions on established homes are also ending. That means some buyers may feel more pressure trying to enter the market. I think they're definitely going to feel the pressure. The challenge is happening at a time when Hobart prices are still rising and affordability remains a major issue. What is your take on what is happening in Tasmania at the moment around all of that, Margaret?
I'm just wondering if the reason they're taking it away is because they've started to realise that initially it was really more of an incentive for the younger population to stay in town. Tasmania has one of the highest proportion of outward migration of their younger population than any other area in the country. And I think it's because what happens in Tasmania, which is a beautiful area, but people go seeking both the jobs and the educational opportunities up in Melbourne and Sydney, and therefore they leave Tasmania. Tasmania also has an exceptionally high proportion of retirees. So I just wonder whether or not the state government has gone, okay, well, this extra incentive isn't making a whole lot of difference because we don't have a huge number of younger people who are going to need that anyway. They're not settling here, and the older population, they don't need any sort of incentives because very few of them will be considered to be first home buyers. And maybe they're removing that because they realise that there's just not big enough take up on it. That doesn't help the people who do need it, but I really just think that the demand from those first home buyers in Tasmania, particularly in Hobart, is not as great as it is in other parts of the country because of those reduced employment opportunities and the reduced educational opportunities as well.
Yeah, and on the positive side, Tasmania is seeing an increase in new building approvals, which could help improve housing supply over time, which is some good news at least. And the median value of a home in Hobart at the moment, $728,000, while the rest of Tasmania has a median price of $572,000. Margaret, we will leave it there. Good stuff. Enjoy your day. Catch you back on the Real Estate Breakfast soon.
Thank you.
We don't just report on real estate news, we take you to the source of the information. We produce more property podcasts every week than anyone else. We are your trusted guide for all things real estate.
I had my daughter fall ill on our last trip. We were in and out of the hospital and back in our hotel with less than an hour. You go into the emergency system in Australia, it's vastly different. You'll be there all night.
It's already in the property when you bought it, right? Every other deduction crate that you get for your investment property, you have to physically pay out cash, whether it be your property management fees, your rates, your taxes.
The introduction of that 5% deposit guarantee without any limit on numbers, without any qualification as to income, it's enabled an enormous number of first-home buyers to enter the market.
Yeah, that's absolutely true. I have spoken with some developers and architectural groups who are using the Middle East and even Florida, interestingly, as examples for what they could bring down under. And one particular thing that we haven't seen a lot of in Australia and may well do that other countries are doing is branded residences.
We connect you to the best real estate information across Australia. The Real Estate Podcast.